Hello dear learners, let's continue our discussion on the topic of organizational structure and design. In the previous sessions, we have talked about the definition of organizational structure, the purpose of the organization structure, the design elements and the various configurations as proposed by Henry Mintzberg. We also have discussed about the dimensions that it influence on the organizational structure. This is the concluding session of this particular module on structures of public organization, wherein I will discuss about the major design alternatives. Now, if you look into the literature and you look into references which I have mentioned on the slide here, various types of design alternatives are available in literature. The organization structures can take a shape of a functional structure or product or divisional structures. In some texts it is written as product structure, in others it is called as divisional form structure. Then some organization can also have a matrix based structure, market or customer focused, geographical structures, process based structures and holacracy. So, I will discuss all these design alternatives one by one, and I will also talk about some of the examples from the public sector organizations which have some of these design alternatives as their structures in place, right. Let's first of all start talking about the functional design. Now, as per the functional structures, the structures in this particular form, the activities are grouped together by common function from the bottom to the top of the organizations. Now, if I give you an example of, let's say, management as function, right? Management has many functions, managerial functions, management functions if we talk about. If I want to say that management function have functional expertise in terms of, let's say, human resource as a function, okay, marketing as a function, purchase or I will say operations as a function, finance as a function. So, if the organization is structured in such a way that the entire organization is divided into functions across, activities are grouped together by a common function, then we can say that the structure is following the functional design, because the activities are grouped in such a way that the similar kind of activities are grouped as per their function that they serve, right. For example, engineering as a function. So, if we group the activities of engineering into one, because these activities are defined by the common function of engineering, we say it is a function. So, when we group the activities and then define them into the various functions, the organization will take a function of a shape of functional design. Now, what is the applicability and the features of the functional design? This particular structural configuration and the structure is most effective in cases of requirement of in-depth expertise for meeting the organizational goals. Now, wherein we are looking for an in-depth expertise. For example, if you look at engineering, all the people in this particular domain will be expert in their field, or let's say marketing, all the people in that particular domain will be expert in the marketing field. And if we are looking forward for this kind of configuration, this kind of structure to meet the organizational goal, in that case the functional design will be more appropriate, right. Control and coordination by vertical authority, because in the functional structure we will have layers, we will have top management, middle management, and then there are subunits. So, vertical authority means people at the higher level will have more control over the lower levels, and the coordination will help will be taking place with the help of vertical authority. So, here is a efficiency focus. The focus of the structure is on efficiency. Effective when little coordination is required for horizontal coordination. So, this is basically this particular functional structure will be effective when you need little coordination between engineering, marketing function or the HR function, then it will be fruitful. Advantages are accomplishment of the functional goals, enables in-depth knowledge and skill development, and disadvantages are these structures are not able to respond to the changes in the business environment, because each function will act as a separate entity, will have more specialized function, they will take time to respond to the changes outside. So, disadvantage is that they are not very apt to respond to the changes in the business environment. They will have poor horizontal coordination. The reason is because they will be working as more silos, more specialized units. So, coordination is a difficult thing there. They will have less innovation and hierarchy overload, because top level people will have more of the admin work because they have to coordinate and control the activities of the lower level. There will be lot of hierarchical overload there, right? Let us look into the example of this functional structure from one of the public sector undertaking in the country. I have taken this extract structure from the article which is given over here. I have taken it from the site of Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited. So if you look at on the top, we have top management, if you see, right? Then if you see that we have each function, engineering and R&D, finance as a function, director of HR, chief vigilance officer, director power, director industrial system and functions. You see that function, 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 function and function. So activities are grouped according to the function, and you see below there are also a subunits being created, right? So what is happening is director HRs here, or the finance or the power, and here they will have more vertical authority to control and coordinate the activities of the subunits below the line, right? So ultimately, if you look at this structure here, it gives you a glimpse of the functional structure in an Indian public sector undertaking, right? I hope you have understood this, that there is a top management, right? And just below the top management, we have created the functional structure, where we have engineering and R&D as one function, finance is another function, HR is another function, power is another function, industrial systems and products are other functions. And within each domain function here, we have subunits. For example, in case of engineering as a function, we have corporate R&D, corporate digital transformation. In case of HR, we have corporate HR, and down the line recruitment and industrial relation. In case of power, we have nuclear business and hydro business. So the activities control, you see, in this case, what is happening is more control is there with the vertical authority. But if you look at the coordination between these two, director R&D and finance and these departments, it's little, it is effective. There is no coordination, much coordination is required there. So this is about the functional structure prevalent in BHEL. Then comes the product/divisional design. This particular structure, they have separate divisions which can be organized with responsibility for individual products, services or business. Now what you can do is you can actually segregate the various units, divisions, depending upon different products or services or businesses, right? Strategic business unit is the other term which is being used for product divisional design. You please look into the reference mentioned here and find out more about it. Applicability and features. These structures are more effective in case of requirement of change and flexibility. There is a decentralized authority, means in case of functional structure we say there is a vertical authority. Here in this case of decentralized authority, means the power to take decision making is passed down to the lower levels in the organization. They are excellent in achieving coordination across functional departments. Now you see how it works. For example, if I say there is a top management here, if you look at, okay, then we have the structure like this. We have product A, product B and product C. Each product will have their own functional unit. For example, they have HR, manufacturing, I am just giving an example of some, finance, engineering, let's say. Now within the product division, you will have better coordination, right? But in the functional structure, it was not possible, right? So in this case, when the divisions are made according to the product, there is a better coordination within. Excellent in achieving coordination across functional departments. Now what are the advantages? It's suited for fast change, higher customer satisfaction because products divisions are created, high coordination across, good for organization with many products, decentralized decision making. So decision making has been handed over to the product divisions. They can then manage their own divisions with the help of the various functional expertise. Disadvantages: poor coordination across product line. There could be the issue of poor coordination across the product line. For example, product A and product B and product C makes integration and standardize across the product lines difficult, because different divisions are having different functional units which are working. There may be some difficulty in bringing integration and standardization across the product lines. Let's look at the structure of National E-Governance Division, NEGD. They have different teams for different products, which include software developers, app designers, analysts, testers. In terms of, we talk about the support functions. For example, the product like Umang, DigiLocker, LMS, MyScheme, API Setu, and the Portion Tracker. These are some of the products division being created in terms of, you can say, products, services, or businesses. And then there are different teams which are working for them. So it exemplify the product or the divisional form in the Indian public sector. Then comes the metric structure. Now, this structure, it's actually focused on multi-focused, with both product and function getting emphasis at the same time. I'll also tell you what is the meaning of how these are coming together. Now, what happens is, we will have broad function at the top, and then we will see vertically different product lines, product A, B, C, and D, and over above we have all support functions given there. So what happens is, each of the product will have support from the supporting functions there. And in this case, what happens is, this becomes most effective when both technical and product innovation and changes are important to meet the organizational goals. We need both technical support from the functions, and product innovation is required to meet the goals of the organization, right? Both product divisions and functional structures are implemented simultaneously. In this case, what happens is, the feature is product and functional managers have equal authority. So the people who are working in, let's say, product division A, they also need to report to the managers in product A as well as the functional department there, right? It is appropriate for medium-sized organization with different products. Let's look into the advantages, then I'll give you the example. These are suited for complex decisions and frequent changes. Opportunity for both product and functional skill development in this case, because the both are getting the prominent and prevalence at the same time. Disadvantages is, there is a dual authority leading to frustration and confusion among the members of the divisions. Great effort is required to maintain power balance, because you see, there are dual authority. There are product managers, there are functional managers, right? More meetings and conflict resolution sessions because of the misunderstanding and the conflicts happen between the organizations and the divisions. Look at this metric organization structures at UR Rao Satellite Center, ISRO. I have taken this from the reference mentioned here. Please go through this. You see that if you look at this particular aspect of the metric structure here, you see that these deputy directors are from different functions. You see, they are all different kind of function, okay? And we have different kind of programs. There I talked about the products, the different programs in case of ISRO, science and space, satellite navigation, user funded projects, technical application, technology application and projects, and special, right? And then there are support functions which are being given here. Now you see, in case of functions, and if you look at science and space, they will getting resource from all the functions which are mentioned over here. Satellite navigation, reporting to the manager here, and reporting to the managers who are having the different kind of functional division there. So this is how the functional, the metric structure will look like, in the organizational setup. This again I have taken as an extract from the mentioned over here. You can just go and find out the details of this. Herein you see that there are deputy directors for each of the function here, which are mentioned over here. These are all function: controls and digital, management and information system, integration and checkout. And then these are the programs. You can also equate with them the product I have just mentioned. For example, science and space program, special products program, technology application project. So each one of that will have their own heads, as well as they're getting support from the deputy directors of the various functions mentioned over here, right? Then comes the geographical design. In this kind of a structure, the structural grouping is based on the organization's users or customer, and most common structure based on geography, right? For example, we can say that we have an office structure depending upon northern region, the southern region, the western and the eastern region, depending upon where the customers are. So the applicability of this particular structure, the research says, is on non-profit organization with central headquarters and various local units. I'll talk about the examples from India. Headquarters handle administrative function and daily activities. Control and decision making lies with the local units. So headquarters are responsible for administrative function, and daily activities, control and decision making lies with the local units. Advantages: Organizations can adapt to specific needs of its local unit because they are geographical based. Horizontal coordination within a region is of emphasis. Within a region, there will be a lot of local units will be available. So, within a region, it is going to be easy, the coordination, but there could be poor coordination across region, which is a disadvantage of this particular structure. Look at the structure of large organization. We have National Informatics Center. National Information Center is headed by Director General, which is further subdivided in Delhi headquarters and 36 state UT centers. Headquarters will have groups which are further subdivided into divisions, while state UT centers, states information officers followed by assistant SIOs. NIC has office in every district of the country with their offices located in the district magistrate and collector office usually, and is manned by district information office, informatic office and assistant district informatic officer. The interactive organizational chart of this is available on the NIC structure. You please click on this particular link and find out what is the structure there. Let us see if you can look at here. There is a Director General, then there are headquarters further into heads of various groups, and there are heads of divisions and then project and services, right. On the other hand, we have 36 UT state centers, then there is a state informatic officer, then there are assistant state informatic officer. You see that how many district centers and HODs of the state product and services. So, this gives an example of geographical structures based on the geographical, how the structure can take place depending upon this, right. We have just talked about National Information Center as the example of geographical structure. Then we talk about market and customer focused, grouping based on customer and markets, more applicability in service sector. If you look at the banking sector, you know, if they have actually structured them as far as the banking is concerned based on what the customer, you know, you have retail banking, you have corporate banking, and then divisions depending upon which category of customers that you are serving. So, largely the division of the various units in the organization or departments are based on the customers and markets. On the other hand, if we have process focused, divisions are organized around the processes such as customer acquisition, new product development processes, etc. Right? This is a process focused. Typical organization of structure of an Indian ministry, if you look at, I'm just talking about the the structure of the any Indian ministry. You have a ministry, and then you have minister and minister of state. Then there are departments. Departments, they will have secretary. Wings will have special secretary, additional secretary, joint secretary. Divisions will have deputy director or deputy director and deputy secretary. Branches will have under secretary. Sections will have section officer, and then assistants, UDC and LDCs, right. Look into this particular link over there to look into the organizational structure of Government of India, typical structure of the Government of India. You will see this kind of structure prevailing there, right. Now, finally, the structure type of holacracy, which is defined as a decentralized management and organizational structure of governance that claims to distribute authority and decision making via self-organizing teams. So, in this case, what happens is basically a no structure. There is no structure which is prevailing. The coordination and authority decision making happens through the self-organizing team. Some consider it to be an extension of adhocracy. You remember that we discussed about the configurations proposed by Henry Mintzberg. We talked about the adhocracy also, very complex structures where we have very specialized people for the functioning in the organization, right. So, coordination happen through mutual adjustment. So, in this case, some researchers considered it an extension of adhocracy. Holacracy focus on self-organization without formal hierarchy, without job titles and job descriptions, right. It's one of the form. Researchers says that in times to come, this is going to be the future of the organizational structure, but more and more research evidence is required to look into this, right. Let's look at to some of the interesting research papers on the structures in the public sector organization. Organizational structure, work involvement and job performance of the public servants, public employees. This study is by Johari and Yahya, article titled Structure, Involvement and Performance of Public Sector Servants, published in International Journal of Public Administration. The emphasis of this study is on role of codification. This particular codification is a component of the structure as a predictor of job performance. We need to see that whether this structure has any impact on the job performance in the organization. So the authors have to find out job performance is positively impacted if roles and responsibility are clearly codified. If it is very clear that the roles and responsibility, what are expected from the people in the organization, the job performance is going to be positively impacted, right? In this research, they considered work engagement as a mediator, means when public servants are more involved in their work, the positive effect of structures on the job performance are enhanced, right? It says that there is a structure, there is a performance, right? We are linking the structure impact on performance of the people, public servants. They say that it is contingent on the work engagement levels among the people, work involvement level among the people. So the structure can lead to higher level of job satisfaction if the public servants are also very much involved in their work. The paper also highlights the importance of designing and maintaining a clear organizational structure within the public service agencies because they are linked with the job performance, and that is what we need in the organization, right? So it also points out the need for continuous evaluation and adjustment of the structure to keep them aligned with the changing needs and expectations of both the public as well as the employees. So structure has important implications for the job performance of the employees in the organization. So it is good that the organization is clear. Organization is clear about what kind of structure it wants to give it to in the organization to its employees so that their job performance is enhanced. Another study, effective leadership in public organization, the impact of organizational structures in Asian countries by Valero, published in 2015, Journal of Contemporary Eastern Asia. This paper highlights the importance of structure and leadership in the context of disaster. This is the case of South Korea. Hierarchical structures seem to be the norm where lower level organizations work at the direction of higher level organizations, right? So it's a hierarchical structure. Now in case of Japan, extensive preparedness was seen during the disaster where transformational leaders under different organizational structures are empowered to effect change. You see that context varies. In case of South Korea, more hierarchical structure. In case of Japan, transformational leaders, they are better prepared to during the disasters, and it affects the change. This also suggests the further avenues of research in the areas of impact of structures on transactional leadership. This particular aspect of culture and the transactional and transformational leadership I will pick up in the discussion on leadership module also, wherein we will talk about the detail of leadership and the impact of culture and vice versa. Further, this research study suggests future research should also be directed to analyze the impact of centralization and formalization on whether public manager exhibit transactional or transformational traits. Whether centralization or formalization can lead to either of this, either transactional or transformational traits, right? With this, we have come to the final section of this session, which is reorganization. As we talked about the organization, reorganization is about process of rearranging organizational units to meet new needs. There is a dynamic change, a lot of dynamism in the environment in which the organizations are functioning. So depending upon the changes in the outside environment, there is a need to bring in change inside the organization also, and for that sometime there is requirement of rearrangement of the organizational unit, right? What is the purpose? Break up the dysfunctional patterns of organizational behavior. OB says that sometimes the structures lead to some kind of dysfunctional patterns. So in order to change those dysfunctional patterns, we need to change the structure. Remember, we talked about the concept of informal and formal networks in the organization when we talked about the contribution of Chester Bernard in the module 2. We did talk about the importance of informal communication network, but sometimes the structures lead to some kind of dysfunctional patterns, and to break that, sometimes reorganization is required. Then creation of more logical combination of functions to enhance the effectiveness. So this change is required to sometimes enhance the effectiveness. It's not only about when something changes outside, then only you need to bring in changes. Sometimes it also happens that to increase the efficiency of the processes. If you remember, we talked about the high performance organization in the module on goals and goals, effectiveness and performance. We talked about that process innovation finding out the creative ways to bring in changes in the process is also one of the character of a high performance organization. So reorganization to enhance the effectiveness is one of them, right? Also emphasize new or modified goals, missions or objective. As you change your goals or missions or objectives, there would be a need to reorganize the organizational units to increase the performance. And also rewarding or encouraging excellent performers. Sometimes you need to bring in some kind of changes in the structure. Cost of reorganization. So if you decide to go for reorganization, what will happen? First, negative impact on employee morale, because organizational employees have already accustomed to one way of working. They already have the informal network in place of communication. They already know how things work in here. So if you try to shake things up in terms of reorganization, there will be some kind of course, resistance and employee morale. The disruption in the informal pattern of I have just talked about, because once you shake the organizational structure where people already have the informal networks ready. For example, if you move people away from each other because they are together because of the informal network or let's say formal network, and you move away these people, ultimately it will negatively impact the employee morale, right? It impacts the productivity negatively, at least for in the beginning when you start reorganization. Maybe after some time it will pick up, but in the beginning the productivity will be negative. It's not good. Sometimes it is a mismatching of functions, great burden on informal mechanisms. Sometimes you bring in those people together where there's a mismatching of functions, and then there's informal mechanism where it's a great burden on them. Overall organization effectiveness impacted negatively. Now these are some of the negatives which are mentioned here, but we don't need to say that you need to not go for reorganization because of this. You may also have these kind of issues whenever you decide to go for reorganization, but you see in the beginning there will always be these kind of problems which will have to which will you encounter, but you have to overcome this. Perhaps in the beginning there is a problem, but as you go along with the reorganization, if you have thought about it strategically, then it can favor you in the long run, right? Decision to reorganize. You should not just decide to reorganize based on one day you think that okay, we need to reorganize this structure. No, it should be strategic, long-term thinking, right? Why do you want to change the structure of the organization, and where do you want to take this organization forward with the new structure? You have to thorough analysis of costs and benefits. So if the benefits are going to be larger than the cost, then you can go for the structural changes in the organization, right? Also, you need to make an assessment based on the human terms and in terms of likely functional matchup. Please do this exercise carefully, that you have considered all the aspects related to the reorganization. You have looked into the aspects of human terms, and of course looking into which functions can match up together. Otherwise you will end up increasing the burden of the informal mechanisms there, right? Let's look at some of the cases here. Transformational change process in a large corporation, a case of prominent Indian public sector undertaking, authored by Lathar, Jain and Verma, published in Vilakshan XIMB Journal of Management. Now they have looked at the transformation that happened in one of the India's public sector undertaking. The name is not disclosed because of the the anonymity in the paper. So they talked about the Indian public sector undertaking. Now in this case, what they have seen is many factors like incorporation as a company, recognition as a Navratan, entry to capital market, etc., opening up of oil sector to private sector have necessitated change. There is a necessity because of this reason that has kind of influenced organization to go for change, right? The organization have been recognized as a Navratan company, opening up the oil sector to the private sector players. So intense competition will be going to increase, and then these all factors which have changed in the environment outside has organizations necessitated for change, bringing in change. This exercise was undertaken in 1997, and it took them more than 5 years to reinforce this transformation. See, whenever you are going to go for any kind of change, there will be some kind of resistance. So you have to continually reinforce by the way of incentives or communication or encouraging people to go for this process, right? Change is always difficult, painful. And then this process was questioned as a project involving internal and external stakeholders. It's important because you need to know which direction you want to go to. Many brainstorming sessions happened. SWOT analysis to review and reframe the vision of the organization was undertaken because transformation is a lengthy process. Steering committee and several other committees were formed to implement the change. The process has transformed the company into risk-taking and future-ready organization. So whenever the change has come in and you have tried to change the transformation in particular organization, so this change process has led to the company becoming more risk-taking and future-ready organization, right? According to employees, the company has improved its communication, decision-making standard, quality concern, physical facility at workplace, use and application of individual competence, structure. That's what we are saying. Structure change, cooperation and collaboration, competency building, empowerment and delegation, HR system, technology and financial strength. So whenever the transformation takes place, it's not only about the structure, it's about various other factors as they mentioned, decision making, quality concern, application of individual competence and so on and so forth. So this transformation change also is indicating that because of the changes happening outside the organization environment, sometimes influence and direct organization to change themselves, right? So with this, we are concluding the session on structures of public organization, where we have talked about in detail the meaning of the organization. We studied about the purpose of the organization. We had discussion on various dimensions and the influence of this dimension on the structures of the organization. Then we moved ahead with the discussion on organizational design, wherein I have talked about the configurations proposed by Henry Mintzberg in terms of the various structures types. We talked about the various types of structures and their prevalence in the Indian public sector organization. We talked about the aspects of reorganization, their costs and benefits attached to it. We also have included discussion on some of the research studies on organizational structure and its impact on the job performance, and why and in what cases the organizations undergo changes in their organizational structure.